Cool. This video is going to be titled Always Have Gratitude. I'm going to explain it from an internal aspect and how to implement it to make a difference in your manifestation. So, what is manifestation? Manifestation, shifting from an internal aspect, so shifting internally and not being emotionally dependent on seeing your reality change, so not being emotionally dependent on what you see externally, but knowing it and self-validating yourself internally. You do this through having a visualization, through meditation, or someone significant to you congratulating you about doing what it is that you want to manifest. You then loop this memory, and because you loop it, you emotionally intensely experience it as if it's real, and you then assume that it's real and already taken place, and through assuming that it's already taken place and emotionally intensely feeling it as if it is real, your subconscious, you then cause a new frequency. You then write down this new desired version of you, this new manifested version of you, and then you operate from this new version of yourself. And because you're operating from this new version of yourself, internally self-validating yourself that you are now this version. Once you say I am that version, you now self-validate yourself as that version. So because of this, there's a new cause. So you shifting internally is a new cause, which creates a new effect, because you then do your actions, because faith without works is dead. So you then do the actions that you're doing after or partaking in from the internal aspect of the already accomplished, already successful version of yourself. And because you're doing it from that version of yourself, the visualization has already taken place, therefore you've already been congratulated. Therefore, everything you have in abundance. If there's no importance to it, and you're good with or without it, as within, as without, you would then manifest even quicker. And because you're internally congratulated, you would then get used to being congratulated as the new version of yourself. Because this is something that exists as the new version of yourself, the new cause. This is a part of the cause. So because it's part of this new cause, this new version of yourself, and you already identify and are this version of yourself, these things will then begin to take place because you're now operating internally from a new version of yourself when you're doing the actions. So it's not that the actions have changed, it's that the version of you doing the actions has changed. And because you do it with gratitude, and because you're congratulated, you will always have gratitude. So because you always have gratitude and you're always thankful, again, this is also something that you will emotionally intensely experience, being thankful and having gratitude. Because you keep having gratitude, everything you have in abundance. As this new version of yourself, you will then always have gratitude. And because you always have gratitude internally, you self-validate yourself once again. It will therefore show up, or therefore has to show up in reality. So it has to show up externally. But with manifestation, it's shifting internally. So you can't be emotionally dependent on seeing the reality change. So you can't but you can't emotionally react in the sense of needing it. You can't need to feel, or you can't need to have gratitude. You should already have it. And because there's no importance to you already having it, you're good with or without it, it will keep repeatedly happening because there's no importance to it, and everything you have in abundance. So because there's no importance, you're good with or without it, as within, as without, it will keep happening. But once you signal neediness or wanting wanting something that signals internally that the person doesn't have it. So because they're wanting or they're needing something internally, they don't currently possess it. So because they don't currently have it internally, it therefore can't show up externally. So that's why having gratitude, because you have it internally and you already know that internally, it therefore has to show up in reality, because reality has to catch up with whatever you profess and proclaim to be. So once you say I am and declare a manifestation and a visualization, when you have it clearly written out what you desire to be and now are, it's already taken place. You just have to know with certainty that it's taken place from that moment on. So synchronicities and what people say signs, they're not signs or synchronicities unless you consciously label them as synchronicities or signs, as that new version of yourself internally. Because if you don't, then they're just synchronicities. That doesn't mean they have significance to you unless you label them or give them significance to you. But again, even doing that, that still somewhat contradicts being emotionally dependent on seeing the reality change. Because you're looking at something external in reality, which is the illusion of. Whereas when you know it internally, you self-validate yourself. So because you know it internally, nothing externally can push your center, because internally you already are that. You already are what you proclaim to be, because you've shifted to that version of yourself internally. So you already mentally have the self-concept, the self-beliefs, the self-worth of the version of yourself internally. That's already accomplished, congratulated, receives gratitude, is abundant, has prosperity, all the good attributes that you know the best version of you has. That version of you has internally, because that version of you knows that they have it. So you just have to shift to that version of you that knows internally you're the best version of yourself. And because you shifted to that version internally, nothing in reality or nothing external can validate you but yourself. And you've already validated yourself once you say, I am that version of myself. So from then on, you just have to be, whatever you're doing or the stuff that you are then doing, you have to operate from that version of yourself consciously. And because you're operating from that version consciously, there's a new cause internally which creates a new effect externally. But it starts internally. So internally having gratitude, internally feeling congratulated, internally feeling accomplished, all these things. Because you're internally feeling these things and emotionally intensely feeling them, your subconscious is clinging to it, and you're then experiencing it in reality through abundance, because there's no importance to it. So the emotionally intense experience was the important one because you felt it. So now that you felt it, this new version of yourself knows what it's like to emotionally intensely experience being congratulated. So now that will keep happening, essentially. Same with being congratulated, feeling happy, feeling comfort, security, whatever it is that the person essentially is internally shifted to. Once it's emotionally intensely felt and visualized, whatever the mind can believe and whatever the mind can believe, whatever the mind can conceive and see, something along those lines, it can achieve. So whatever you can see and emotionally intensely experience at the same time, you can therefore assume it's then real and taken place. And it has, once you declare that it has. And that you're that version of yourself. But it starts with an internal shift. It doesn't start externally. Because you can do all the things externally and still be in the same place because the person hasn't shifted internally. So the old version of themselves, or the version of themselves that can't do that, is still trying to do that, but you can't outrun your frequency. So that's how you have to shift internally, which is the frequency. You have to shift the frequency internally to therefore create new results externally. You can't create new results externally by trying to change things externally, because that's trying to change an effect by an effect, and you can't change an effect by an effect. You have to change the cause first. The cause is you, in how you feel internally in that moment of time before the action is done. How you feel internally impacts how well the action is done. So the cause is the internal shift with you first, starting with you first. And then the new result is the action done to a better standard, which creates a new effect. And that's how it works. So always have gratitude.